day Brian gets on a plane to Bahamas. Of course. Oh, did you put your shovel away? I knew it. It's like someone did it.
Shame on you.
Yeah,
How's
that's
my audio, Debbie?
Offset me putting my shovels away.
Oh, you sound good, Jay.
Cool, just checking in. Much appreciated.
Seattle.
Good, how are you?
Doing fine.
Good.
Not as full from Hennessy.
Not tonight for some reason.
everyone's getting ready for the snow.
Like anybody wanted to come and visit us tonight. Well, I mean, okay, it's 6 PM, February 22nd, 2022. It's a regular assembly meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mark,
Here.
Jeff,
Here.
David,
Here.
Jay.
Here.
Chelsea,
Here.
Thomas, Bob,
Here. Yeah, we have a full assembly here tonight. Member Stan Gregor's zooming in, so it's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. Flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have next item on the agenda, approval of minutes. There is one meeting from February 2nd, regular assembly meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So move.
Second.
Changes? All those in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, tonight's agenda, item 4, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any amendments to tonight's agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve as presented.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item five, public hearings, public hearing for ordinance 2022-01. This is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of electric utility revenue bonds of Petersburg Borough Electric Utility. Any public testimony regarding this ordinance should be put forward at this time. Anybody interested in participating in a public hearing? Member Koenigs, please state your name and who you represent.
John Koenigs, resident of Petersburg. And I'm very much in support of what's going on in the development of this. So I encourage you to adopt this and proceed with this project as quickly as you can. So I'm very much in support of it.
Great, thank you for your input. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to participate in the public hearing? And I don't believe we have anybody calling in for this issue, right, Clerk Thompson?
Not.
Okay, that being said, the public hearing is closed. Next item on the agenda is Caterpillar 399 in-frame overhaul. Utility Director Hagerman requests award to overhaul one of Power and Light's diesel generators to NC Machinery / NC Power Systems for an amount not to exceed $158,572.11. So I'd entertain a motion to approve that bid award.
So move.
Second.
So any discussion on the bid award or questions? Clerk, call the roll.
Mayor?
Yes, oh, I didn't,
Yeah, just maybe if we could just get a brief overview of what this is for the folks at home, maybe if Carl could kind of give us just a brief update on what it is.
Sure, yeah, through the
Thank you.
mayor. So this project is, we have several generators, of course, Power and Light to supplement hydropower when there's an outage. And this is one of our smaller units, but still used quite a bit for at putting on smaller loads as we're running the diesel plant and the need arises to bring on a smaller amount. And it is a 1978 generator. We did have the generator end cleaned a couple of years ago. And we are at this time seeking funds or an award to rebuild the diesel end of the generator so that we can keep it ready to go at all times. And the sole proposer on this NC Machinery out of Juneau is a longtime vendor for us and very competent and dependable in their workmanship. So we're hoping to get an award tonight of this work and keep the diesel plant tip top.
thanks for the filling us in there, Mr. Hagerman. Any other questions? Okay. See none, clerk call the roll.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas, Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Okay. Move on to item 7. And this is persons to be heard related to items on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience or on the phone that would like to participate in this? Have a 5-minute limit. Please state your name and who you represent.
My name is Don Koenig. And I'd like to address ordinance that's being under new business, ordinance 2022-02, which would amend section 2020-050 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Restrictions on Dual Office Holding. Prohibit the member of the assembly from being a candidate for mayor and using unless the assembly member first resigns from his assembly seat. I strongly endorse this and support this. It's long overdue. Over the years that I've been in the city, it's come up from time to time. But it's unfortunate, in my opinion, that it wasn't placed in the code, the charter. When I look at the references in the charter, and I refer to section 204 vacancies and forfeiture of office, it just only describes what transpires in the latter part of ordinance section C, the filling of a vacancy, and that it would be done by the assembly and those that are holding office and until the regular election is held to replace that individual. But internally, it would be replacing it. And I think it's inappropriate, in my opinion, that a person who's holding assembly seat and wishes to run for the highest office in our community as a representative of the city, they should resign their seat and whoever that he or she may be, and then proceed to place and then use the rest of the charter itself to show how you would replace that. So that person would then, if what was elected, that his seat her seat would be vacant. And then from within the assembly, they get to pick whom they want from the public or from the assembly to move people around. And I don't think that's the appropriate way to do that. So I support the ordinance as it's drafted here. And I wish you would at least, if nothing else, give it consideration. It says it's under new business so that the public can have an opportunity to also testify in this at your subsequent meetings. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on items related to tonight's agenda? Clerk Thompson, one on the phone.
Yes, we do have Brittany Bell on the phone. Let me turn her on here. Okay, Brittany? I think
Hi,
you're
does
on,
that work?
Brittany.
Am I okay? All right, sorry. Hi, yeah, this is Brittany Collum calling in regards to the police department. I saw it was on the agenda again, and the last time we had a borough assembly meeting, they were on the list, and we had heard some really eye-opening testimonies from the police department. And then really good testimony from the members of the community as well, that they need support in some backup as far as wage increases and just being able to give them what they need to stay in town. And I just wanted to once again voice our support for the police department and would ask that we support them however possible. They're doing an outstanding job and have done and continue to do so much for the community. And I do hope that the reason they are on the agenda once again is to move in a direction to get them what they need. And I hope that it's productive and a helpful thing to them and not putting them under a microscope to kind of pick away at things. So anyway, thanks for allowing me to call in today, and hope you all have a good evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony this evening. So there's anyone else on the phone, Clerk Thompson?
There is not.
Okay, anyone in the audience that would like to speak on items related to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, item 8. That's persons to be heard on items unrelated to tonight's agenda. Is there anyone that would like to speak to that? Okay, please step forward and state your name and who you represent, ma'am.
My name's Jolene Duddles. I'm a resident of Petersburg. I'm coming forward to talk about the lot 1015 Sandy Beach, which is city-owned property that has been requested to be disposed of. I understand that it will most likely be discussed on the next assembly meeting, but I will not be in town and probably unable to attend by Zoom, so I wanted to make sure that I was here in person to speak in regards to it. I've lived in Petersburg for over 5 years now. After moving here, Sandy Beach quickly became mine and my daughter's favorite park to visit, not only for the play area located at the area, but also for the rural feel of the park. I enjoy the fact that you didn't feel crowded by houses. I love the neighborhood so much that when the house became available for sale, my husband and I did not hesitate to purchase the property, which also happens to be next door to the lot in question. I have several concerns in regards to the city placing this lot up for sale. Firstly, as a member of the community who enjoys the tranquility and rural feel of Sandy Beach Park, selling this lot to a private party will forever and drastically change the feel and the scenery of the area. This lot is compact and full of old growth trees. No doubt many of the trees will be cut down for a home to be built. And unlike the houses adjacent to Sandy Beach Park right now that are nestled back into the area, due to the small lot size, a house will most likely crowd the beachfront. We have spoken to other people in the community and I have managed to gather over 95 signatures of residents on a petition that I will be turning in who also want to keep Sandy Beach as it is and continue to enjoy the tranquility and feel of the area. Secondly, I have concerns to the sale of the lot as a homeowner in the neighborhood. Sandy Beach is supposed to be a low-density residential neighborhood. As more lots are sold and the area developed, it is quickly losing that. The low-density residential zoning of the neighborhood was one of the many draws to purchase in the area. Us and several other neighbors were under the impression that the current lot was zoned as a green space and were shocked when we found out that it wasn't. As a homeowner next to the lot in question, I have concerns of it being sold as my water line, sewer line, and electrical services cross the 1015 Sandy Beach lot, all of which were installed by the city prior to my purchasing of the property at 1013. The zoning maps are also not a correct representation of the property lines, which we discovered just this past month. So more of my utilities are located on the lot than I had originally thought. Also concerning is that 15 feet from the southern corner of my property line located on 1013 is an 8-inch storm drain that leads out to the beach. There is no easement on record for this structure, nor is it location marked or outlined on any document that I have seen in regards to the lot. Our concern is that if anything is altered, disrupted, or changed, it will adversely affect the drainage to the adjacent properties that are already established. I am asking that the assembly considers not selling the property and to take the Planning and Zoning Committee recommendation of rezoning this property as a green space, saving it from future development so that Sandy Beach area can remain rural infill and preserve the landscape of the park. If the assembly does decide to move forward with the sale, I would request that some protection be placed on my utilities and that the city installed on the lot and also around the storm drain location there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming in and giving your testimony this evening. Anyone else in the audience with views unrelated to tonight's agenda? Mr. Koenigs?
My name is Don Koenigs. I have two items I'd like to bring to your attention this evening. And after watching and listening to the assembly over the years since its formation, you have bifurcated the meetings so where you have them during the day and during the evening. And it would be my recommendation for better participation of the public, everybody having an opportunity to attend all the meetings, to have them only in the evening. This is my recommendation for your consideration. And the woman that spoke before me brought up another subject that I looked at and have reviewed, and that concerns the property that is being requested for sale on Sandy Beach. All the neighbors around that area within the limit of 600 feet made comment about wanting to leave it as a green space. And when I'm reading the documents and stuff, they made information that was provided, made it would sound like it was contiguous to Sandy Beach. There's homes on all sides of that piece of property. And then when I observed and went and looked at the property from the road, I didn't trespass. I looked at the property from the road and I could see that crab pots and fishing gear is being stored on the borough property. Are you collecting revenue for that? And how long has that been going on? I'm sure if you look at your Google Maps, you can find out. But the property is already being used. It's already been compromised by cutting trees and placing crab pots and stuff on it. So I find it, the people's opinions next to it don't want anybody to do things, and I can surely understand that. I personally have no problem somebody building next to me, never have, or to the next. That property is up for sale. It's 160, it's appraised at 168,000. And I think you have a great opportunity to generate revenue. Money doesn't grow on trees. And when you have an opportunity and a request to put something on the tax rolls that's going to pay taxes in perpetuity, and it's already been compromised and it's contiguous to other lots that are already been built on, whether they have standing trees on them or the person chooses to cut the trees down, which happens on both sides when you look on Google Earth, I would not take the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think that's foolish on their part to say, let's just make another green space. Every opportunity you have to sell land within the city, I think that's your highest priority and your obligation to consider that. We have enough parks and enough green trees all the way around. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Anyone else with views unrelated to tonight's agenda? You've already spoke on the matter, ma'am, so thank you. Seeing none, no other calls, Clerk Thompson?
There's not.
Okay, so we will move on to board, commission, and committee reports. There's none. Consent agenda, none. Item 11 is next on the agenda, and that's report of other officers. Southeast Conference Mid-Session Summit and Transportation Symposium report. Assemblymember Kinsinger will provide a report of his attendance at the Southeast Conference Mid-Session Summit.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very interesting meeting. The theme of the meeting was getting back to business. But I think the most important thing in reference to our community was a meeting I had with Dick Somerville of P&D, was with the Coast Guard. It was very enlightening and a very productive meeting. As the community is aware, the Elderberry is scheduled to be replaced. The Coast Guard is planning on replacing 4 of the coastal buoy tenders with only 3 coastal buoy tenders. So one place is going to lose one of their buoy tenders. And the Coast Guard never made a commitment on whether we would be getting another buoy tender or not. And so what we tried to do in the meeting was show how the existing infrastructure in the community could support this new vessel using existing facilities, the drive down dock, and their existing location. And then also gave them another option, which was to utilize Scow Bay. And also in the construction of Scow Bay, provide a dedicated finger for the Coast Guard vessels and another community use drive down dock in that area. And it's an exciting plan because we're able to develop this harbor basin. It will also provide moorage for vessels over 60 feet and up, and quite a few of them at that. So they were pretty enthused with it. Actually, it was very well received. The admiral that's in charge of engineering for the entire nation is currently billeted in Juneau because of all the issues that they're having with the deployment of the fast response cutters. And one of their main issues is most of the places where they're putting these cutters, Ketchikan, Sitka, and Kodiak, none of those communities have any land. It's very difficult to find places for them to expand their operations and for housing. And that's the one thing that we have here in this community is we have a lot of land. And so the admiral actually during the meeting actually told one of his staff back in Washington, D.C. that we were going to get a coastal buoy tender here, which is good news. That vessel has a crew of approximately 25 people with shoreside. So vastly increase the number of Coast Guard personnel that are here in the community. While they didn't have a checkbook, they were interested in working with us, particularly with the Army Corps in the development of the harbor basin out at Scow Bay. So the only thing I can really say is there's no guarantees, but it looks promising, and we've kind of made the first baby step towards that development. The other thing, the Southeast Conference, there's quite a bit of opportunity to interact with our state senators and representatives. And they're very well aware of one of the items that we're going to be talking about later on tonight about secondary wastewater treatment. And they're working on a resolution, and I assured them that maybe I went out on a limb, but I said that as a community, we did not want to be spending the amount of money that was going to be necessary to construct this facility. But even if we can get grant funding to construct this facility, the thing that I'm concerned about is the ongoing operation and maintenance costs that we'll have to maintain this type of facility. The one good thing that we have is that Anchorage is also up for line, and they're estimating it would cost like $1.3 billion to construct the secondary treatment that they would need in Anchorage. So I asked that whatever they do, don't give Anchorage a pass and have all the other smaller communities have to do this. And they're very receptive to that. On the transportation front, as you all know, the current administration hasn't exactly been a friend to the marine highway system. And one of the things that was pretty evident is their interest in federalizing the system. Right now, the federal government pays for 90 to 95% of the costs of constructing vessels, port facilities, major overhaul projects. The state's always been responsible for operations. In other words, we have to pay the crews, we have to pay the fuel. Senator Murkowski worked really hard to give us money so that we could revitalize the marine highway system. Be precise, $1 billion for 5 years. Although other states can access that money, it's pretty much legislation was written so that we would get the bulk of it. Unfortunately, the current administration has decided that out of an operating budget of $140 million, they want to use $135 million of federal funds for that. And so I had quite a few discussions with representatives and senators about the inappropriateness of that. The fear would be that if we had federal dollars operating the marine highway system for 5 years, what happens in 5 years? So hopefully that won't come to pass because fortunately the legislature has the power of budgets, but of course the governor can always veto it. Quite a bit of discussion also on and presentations on what we need to do if we want to access a lot of the infrastructure money that's coming down our way. And I passed information on to Liz and Glo, and hopefully we can start working in that direction.
Okay, thank you for your report. Public Safety Advisory Board meeting. Assemblymember Mucci, the liaison to the Public Safety Advisory Board, will provide a report on the recent Public Safety Advisory Board meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the Public Safety Advisory Board met on the 15th of February last week. I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday, but they met. It was more of an organizational meeting and reports from the 2 department heads that are covered under the Public Safety Advisory Boards. They work there as staff. Members of the Public Safety Advisory Board are Mark Testani, Dr. Mark Tasillo, Devin Bennett, Dan Sullivan, and Stan Ewart. Mark Testani is the chair. Dr. Mark Tasillo is the vice chair. On the report from Sandy Dixon, talked about the junior firefighter program and possibly restarting that program. We got an update on the fire truck and where it was and its manufacturing and the date it would be in Petersburg, which is not, it's a ways away. We heard from Chief Kerr, who talked about the 2 patrol cars that were caught in the COVID supply chain maze, and they're getting closer to Petersburg. The chief gave us an update on his training schedule that officers are in. It's very informative. The meeting was recorded, and I'm imagining it'll be on the borough website at one time or another. But yeah, it was very informative, and if people had any questions about the meeting, please feel free to let me know or listen to the recording of the meeting for a full context of what was talked about. So thank you.
Okay, that brings us, Member Tremblay.
Yeah, just for the public, is the Public Safety Advisory Board meeting monthly now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, they talked about quarterly meetings, but they were available in case an issue popped up that the assembly wanted to get their opinions on. So I imagine they'll be meeting as often as needed here in the future. So, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, bring us to the mayor's report. I'll go over the seeking letters of interest. The Petersburg Borough is accepting letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community by filling one of the vacant seats on the following borough boards commissions until the October 2022 municipal election. Planning Commission still have 2 vacant seats. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, 2 vacant seats. Letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the borough offices located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by sending to Post Office Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or by emailing the clerk at dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And I attended the Alaska Municipal League last week, and it was fairly informative. I've got a report from that meeting. Like Member Kinsinger said, the Southeast Conference covered some of these topics as well. Had a conversation with Senator Stedman and Senator Click Bishop, and they said the legislature is they plan on trying to, if it gets by the governor, to refund the loss over the last 2 years of the school bond debt reimbursement. They're also trying to up the revenue sharing, as well as reduce the match or PERS liability for municipalities down from the 22.5%. And the number that will end up at is to be determined. And like Member Kinsinger said, big thank you to Senator Murkowski for getting language specifically in the infrastructure bill that pretty much makes it so the 200 million a year for 5 years has to be in the ferry system. And conversations with the two senators I mentioned earlier, who are both co-chairs of the Finance Committee, Senate Finance Committee, they would like to use that money to construct a couple new vessels. One to replace the Tustamina Cross Gulf one, and then get another new ferry that would run from Bellingham and hopefully Rupert again at some point through Southeast. They'd like to be able to put aside the money that is normally given from the state to the ferry system, put that away in a piggy bank along with the ticket receipts, and use the federal money to operate the system. So that would be a win. Hopefully there's some hope for the ferry system. And had a presentation by Miles Baker with the governor, and he is the lead guy for the governor's office on this infrastructure bill. So if anybody needs any information on this infrastructure bill and the ins and outs of it, as far as the state goes, he would be the one to probably give you the most accurate information. Talked about the challenge in the workforce. We're talking about retention and our workforce. Right now, the state of Alaska is 12,000 jobs short to fill the workforce currently. And if this infrastructure money comes to the states all over the country, that number in Alaska could grow by 15,000. So that pushes it close to 30,000 jobs that we need, 12 currently, and then the other 15,000 that they think they would need to do the work that we might need done with this infrastructure money. And one of the big problems with that is there's no housing in the state for workforce that size, and even what we're looking for now. My notes are a little bit more, see what else is on here. DEC, like Member Kinsinger, had a meeting on Friday right before I left Saturday morning, but right on Friday morning, our lobbyist Ray Matuszewski, Randy Bates from DEC, who was the head of the water division, and Mr. Hagerman zoomed in. We talked to Randy Bates about the EPA and the regulations they're trying to put in on these 9 communities in Alaska. And at first, and from prior meetings during the week leading up to this, our lobbyist was in, it sounded like it was all EPA was pushing these regulations. And I'm gonna ask for Carl to correct me if I get this wrong. But towards the end of the meeting, it sounded like our DEC, state DEC, has changed the anti-degradation regulations. And that has some, impact on them pushing forward these regulations. Mr. Hagerman mentioned in this meeting that we meet the EPA standards under this 301K waiver we've got. So why do we have to do anything? And I mentioned, financing. How are we going to finance this if you force this issue on us? And he talked about grants and 2% loans, and still it would all fall back on the ratepayers. And so kind of interesting that anti-degradation regulation change within DEC wasn't mentioned until that meeting Friday. So the lobbyist looked into it. He had a couple meetings today, and there's been quite a bit of conversation around these, not only about the 9 communities, but Southeast in particular. So we'll see where that goes, but haven't heard back from our lobbyist about the meeting he had today with Senator Stebbin on this issue. Sounded like Representative Ortiz from Ketchikan was going to be in a meeting, and the head of DEC was going to be there, and he was going to ask about this new anti-degradation change. So we'll see. You can try to put him on the point and see, and if you got any answers. So Carl, if you have anything to add to that particular discussion, could you please do that?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think you covered it really well. I think the significance in that meeting was definitely the admission from DEC that something did change while our permit was in effect. And it's not all EPA that is driving this change to add disinfection to our treatment process. It's obvious from the conversation that went on in the meeting that the DEC is completely in favor of moving all primary treatment plants in Alaska, the 9 plants that are left that still have these waivers, to secondary treatment. And while they want to offer that up as a freebie, counting on some federal monies to fall out of the sky and fund all that, they can't guarantee it. So the fact that they're pushing us in that direction is telling to me that they're not really in favor of the 301H waiver program, and they are involved with pushing us to spend that money to increase our treatment process. I think it was a good meeting, and it'll be interesting to see where the politicians take it from here.
Okay, thank you for adding to that. One other thing I brought up during that discussion with Mr. Bates from DEC was what DEC planned to do this year with the wastewater sampling of all the traffic lanes, the larger cruise ships. He said they're still collecting the money, and what they're trying to do with the bill that's in the legislature right now is DEC takes it over. Still collect the $5 a head. It used to be $1 a head for some size vessels, up to $5 for the bigger ships. It'd be $5 for every vessel participating in that business. So that would generate like $7 million a year, I believe he said. Takes $3.5 million a year to operate the DEC for this water monitoring. And the other 3.5 would go into a bank account where you could apply for grants from it. So I asked him, and I know the Assembly in the past has talked about this concern with the complaints we've had from local fishermen and other groups, and then discharging right in our harbor. What's a person do to, voice, say there's an issue? And I said, can a fisherman out in Chatham Strait, just get a sample and send it to you? And he said, well, no, it has to be collected in the right container and by the right person. And I said, okay, well, who does a person call to issue a complaint? Do you have a phone number? And he said, no, currently we don't, or his assistant said that. So I said, well, I passed that along to Senator Stebbin, so he's working on that. And I mentioned to Randy Bates, I said, well, I got your card, I'll just pass your phone number around so people can call him. So he said, fine. So anyway, that was another thing we brought up. And since they've been doing testing, they have in the last couple of years when there wasn't much traffic, they plan on this year, boarding every ship that's going to have passengers on board this summer, from the small ones to the big ones at the start of the season, and they could board them at any time during the season with notification. So they're working on it, and I'll pass this card along to Kirk Thompson, and I've got another one. So if anybody has any questions, any fishermen or charter boaters or anybody like that needs to report a spill, if that's what you want to call it, or something they observed that doesn't look right, then this is the guy to get a hold of. So with that being said, that's kind of long-winded, but that's the end of my mayor's report, unless somebody has a question. Okay, thank you. That brings us to the manager's report. Mr. Giesbrecht.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lots of trail cleaning to do from the fallen trees and limbs by Parks and Rec, so they'll be out and about. They're actually in the process of organizing a triathlon club. For those who may be interested, please talk to Scott Burt, who actually runs triathlons, so he can speak to it. We have swim lessons coming up again soon, so keep in touch with Parks and Rec. And as you probably many aware, we had a COVID outbreak. If the written portion of my report that is way out of date, so I have a different as things change. So our first positive in that facility among the residents was actually on February 10th. So just recently, we went through the whole process without any positives and got hit here at the end. We have a total of 14 cases at the manor with 2 in the last 7 days. So it's not, I think some of you might have heard me, we're not having this massive outbreak. It's just kind of this 1 or 2 and then a day or 2 and then another 1 or 2. All staff up there are currently using full PPE with any positive cases, and we continue to wear N95 masks throughout the whole shift for all the employees. As of yesterday, those residents who are negative were allowed out of their apartments for the first time. No communal activities are scheduled until further notice, and no visitors are allowed as well, although we're hoping to be able to add some of that back in soon. Negative residents are being tested every other day, and in some cases daily if there is a concern over exposure. And staff is testing frequently, not every day, but we're working with PMC on making sure that we meet their testing criteria. One of the challenges is we're running out of rapid tests. So we're using the antigen testing, which we have a bunch of. Not as accurate as the PCR tests, but we test a lot more frequently because of it. It's a way that we can do it quickly. We don't have to bury the PMC lab. And then anybody that tests positive, we send them to the lab to do a follow-up PCR test. So, thanks to Sandy and some of her folks, she's been distributing masks, gowns, and at-home COVID tests and coordinating with PMC to obtain more of those from the state. Josh was at the National Fire Academy to attend the management of emergency medical services. And volunteers for fire, EMS, and search and rescue continue to train in person, and they are accepting applications. Thanks to the volunteers who continue to train and respond. We couldn't do it without them. The little breather due to the break in the winter conditions, Public Works crew has been working on scaling and repainting the department's tilt deck equipment trailer, which is beginning to have some rust issues. The motor pool's new column lift that was part of the remodel of the facility has been a big help by allowing easier access to the underside of this large piece of equipment. Public Works culvert replacement project is out to bid, with the bid opening scheduled for March 11th. And the shop repair project is in the process of being closed out. Streets and motor pool crews are very happy to be back in their permanent quarters after quite a while out. During the recent closure of the library, half the collection was inventoried, roughly 20,000 items, and the catalog was updated. The next half of the collection will be inventoried in early 2023, and staff were also certified in CPR during that process. The Build a Better World Winter Reading Challenge is going on. The Five Finger Lighthouse Society, Petersburg Rotary Club, Humanity in Progress, Petersburg Humane Association were all selected by the winners of the program to receive $250 each. Thank you to the Friends of the Library for making the program possible. Power and Light staff is reviewing various questions and information from engineers and consultants working to further the Blind Slough hydro design and FERC amendment. And Power and Light will be issuing an RFP for the replacement of the Superior building roof very soon. The warmer weather and rain have brought fresh inflows into Crystal Lake, as well as Tyee and Swan Lakes. Hydropower resources look very good for 2022. So we should be in good shape. You've heard enough about EPA and ADEC, so I will skip that portion of my report. I think one of the things that just needs to be said, which is if it does pass, as the cost to ongoing maintenance goes up with added chlorine and stuff. So staff is taking advantage of melting snow to access and cut alder stands for chip addition to the composting program. And our tourship schedule was 115 as the time I wrote this, and I'm not sure if it hasn't gone up again. So continues to build. Harbor staff met with US Coast Guard and P&D engineers to discuss the Scow Bay development. Coast Guard appreciated the opportunity and are interested in continuing the conversations, as Assembly Member Kinzinger mentioned. Stalls are filling up in the harbor earlier than usual. North Harbor is full, Middle Harbor has a few 26-foot stalls open, and South Harbor has a few 42 feet available. Chief Kerr, Clerk Thompson, and I all continue to work on providing the Assembly the report on recruitment and retention in the police department. We met again this morning to review the draft in preparation for the presentation to the Assembly at the first meeting in March. Myself and our consultants from Chilcat Environmental met with Alaska DEC site manager responsible for the evaluation of the Petro warehouse. The meeting went well, and ADEC appears to be recommending the closure of the site with no additional remediation required. The only restrictions might be that the owner could not put a drinking water well on the property, and the borough or other owner would need to notify ADEC if substantial digging and removal of soil was to occur at some point. The borough will reach out to Petro and their contractor Chevron to ask that they include the borough in discussions with ADEC and the final recommendation that may come back on the property at the end of the monitoring period in 2022. There's another monitoring period that is still out there that we will wait to get the results from that before any further actions are taken. And that's everything on my report.
Any questions of the manager on his report? Member Mucci and then Member Kinzinger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions for the city manager. If I may. You know, I've kind of lost track of where we are with any kind of mitigation measures for the cruise ships. Can it just get an update on where we are? Have we moved forward with that?
Sure, I can speak to that through the mayor. We put a team together to work on that. They met and their recommendation was to wait a little bit more time and then get back together again to meet and talk about it as we're closer to the cruise ship season. So Assembly Member Kinzinger and Tremblay were on it, as well as Sandy and Dave Berg, and I'm not sure who else.
Dr. Chisillo and Dr. Hofstadter. Am I
Thank
missing
you.
anyone?
So it's in their hands and they'll do a great job, I'm sure of it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second questions I have are to the retention survey that city staff is working on, our borough staff is working on. Could I just ask a couple questions to see if that information, what will be in the retention report, just so that if it's not going to be covered in the retention report, I could figure out where to go look for that information as well. I was curious if the report is going to have how the schedules are put together. That's one of my first questions.
I can do this, respond to direct questions, or I can just go through the whole brief.
Personally, I'm happy with after the direction from the assembly at the last assembly meeting for administration to come up with a report when we voted 4-3 not to have the Public Safety Advisory Board involved, to wait for your report in March. But if you have an answer for.
Yes, schedules are a part of what's in the document. It talks about different options for different types of staffing levels in both dispatch as well as the police department.
Follow-up question. Will the report have financial numbers for overtime within the police department for the last couple of years?
Through the mayor, yes, we had Jody pull that information. It's an interesting development because actually, because of the low staffing levels, overtime didn't meet its budget, but overall, our payroll was actually down in the police department because we didn't have staff on full time.
Question or two here. Will the report have salary comparisons with dispatch and other police officers for other communities similar to ours?
Yeah, we used the compensation study that the assembly paid for and voted. So we used those numbers, and then also the new CBA information was put it in.
One of the last questions I have here is, will there be any report, if not with this retention survey, about crime statistics in the last couple of years here in Petersburg? Or would that be something that would have to be requested at a later date?
Yeah, that's through the mayor. That's not in this report. It's not really a part of the retention thing. Believe you'd asked that for Jim to work on, and I believe he is. I'd have to defer to the length of time it will take to get that. It's not a report we do as a regular basis, so we have to kind of invent how we're gonna do that. So I can't answer, it's not in the report, but when we can have something like that, I'm not sure the answer to that.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions of the manager on his report? Member Kinsinger.
Yes, on the police retention report, one thing I did notice when I was looking at the comparables between the dispatcher positions in other communities in Southeast was that my survey indicated that most of those positions, they were dispatchers. They were dispatchers / correction officers. And hopefully you'll address that in the report.
Yeah, no, it's like many of our, through the mayor, I apologize. Like many of our positions, it's very difficult to always do a straight comparison from one position to another in different communities. So a water wastewater person in Juneau has a different job than a water wastewater person here. A dispatcher in Juneau, you're exactly right, it's probably just doing dispatch. Dispatcher in Sitka does just dispatch. They have separate correction officers. So when we do those kind of comparisons, we have to take kind of that into account. But we also compare ourselves to communities much smaller than Petersburg that have far less workload that, so it in a sense, it evens out. I can tell you that, I mean, you know, not to spoil the fun when reports delivered, but yeah, we have some work to do on our dispatcher salaries.
Member Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding your employee survey that you're doing with the police department employees, are you getting good response? Or most of your employees responding? How's it all going?
Through the mayor, all the employees in the police department and dispatch, which is what we started with this survey, and they all responded. We got very good feedback. You know, I'll warn you, it's also in the report, but you know, it's hard to, with 7 officers and 3 dispatchers, your survey results is not necessarily a quantitative, you know, oh my God, that's rocket science. Doesn't work that way, but it gives us feedback and it gives us some ideas. And from that, Jim and Debbie and I, Becky, before she went on vacation, I think we're able to put some pretty good ideas together on what the issues are and how they could be addressed.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? If there is none from other assembly members, I have one for the manager. It's about the, excuse me, Petro Marine property. You mentioned something that you couldn't put in a well. What did they say about disturbing the land for footings for buildings or driving piling, or do you have to go, if it comes to a clean bill of health, the property? Is there still a caveat in there that you have to get a permit from DEC to do that type of work?
Yes, sir. Anything deeper than probably about 2 or 3 feet, and we'll see that at some point in a written document. It would involve having to notify DEC, and we don't even know if that means a permit or just a letter to say we're going to do it, or that they could make us test more. We asked for something in writing. DEC is not willing to give it to us at this point. The environmental consultant we used is going to put something in writing as far as his evaluation of the DEC reports that have come out so far. That will be given to the assembly, and that will be put on an agenda, probably the first meeting in March, for the assembly to give me instructions on whether we should proceed, what the next step is. We've had a lot of time go by. So I want the assembly to be able to weigh back in with all of these reports. And the first meeting in March may not be it. We're hoping to get some of the final quarter's worth of data in hands so they can be part of that report. I don't know if that's going to happen. We're just kind of, it's a day-by-day thing. But no decision to move forward will be made without the assembly having a chance to take a look at this stuff and then giving us instructions.
Berlin?
Thank you. As a follow-up to the mayor's question, is there a state policy, a standardized policy on any kind of activities related to a site like that? It's being followed, or what's the rules?
No, to be very direct. We met with the site manager, who I'm guessing is probably fairly young and has not been doing this for a very, very long time. Her supervisor was with her on the call, who was far more knowledgeable. So the conversation on the call was way over my head. I'll admit that right up the front. And so it ended up becoming between the supervisor and our environmental consultant talking through, and environmental consultant trying to put words in DEC's mouth, DEC trying to say, well, I'm not sure I'm willing to say that yet. What's happening is the reports that are coming out show very cleaner, but that's at a former tank farm, very clean does not mean the same as very clean, if, like, let's say your house. So what's the different degrees of very clean? And that's where it gets kind of tricky. At this point, DEC, the best the borough could hope for in that sense would be that DEC closes it with no restrictions. That's meaning they have no more interest in the property and they have no special restrictions. That's likely not going to happen. They will likely close it with restrictions, and that's where you can't put a water well in for drinking water. You can't dig and move soil around without their permission. And we won't, and there may be others, we don't know those yet. So we're still at the mercy of DEC. They don't really have, every site is treated totally differently. They don't have a set of rules other than just, they look at the levels, and this is primarily petroleum. And I'll say this, in both cases, they said this site's pretty clean, that Chevron did a pretty good job. It doesn't mean, and the other thing is the monitoring wells show a very, very slight decline every time they do readings. So the amount of petroleum keeps going down. That's a good thing. But we won't know until we get the final report.
Yeah, Member Stanton, Gregor, do you have any questions?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think I've got some thoughts, but they can be saved as we proceed on some on those topics some other time. Thank you.
Okay, just thought I'd check. Okay, thank you, Mr. Giesbrick, for the report. Brings us on to item 14A under new business. This is an ordinance 2022-01. Excuse me, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of electric utility revenue bonds of Petersburg Borough Electric Utility. This is the second reading. We had a public hearing on it earlier this evening. I'd entertain a motion to approve this in its second reading.
So
Second.
Any discussion? Just for the people listening that didn't listen to the meeting before, this is something we voted on at the last election, and it's to bond for $7,800,000 to do electrical upgrades in the borough's infrastructure. Excuse me. Seeing no other discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, passes unanimously in its second reading. Excuse me for the cough. Item 15, new business. Ordinance 2022-02. This is an ordinance amending section 2.20.050 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled, thank you. Clerk just brought me a cough drop just for people listening there. She's pretty good go. Okay, I'm going to start over. Ordinance 2022-02, an ordinance amending section 2.20.050 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Restrictions on Dual Office Holding to prohibit an assembly member from being a candidate for mayor unless the assembly member first resigns from the assembly, except where the assembly member's term ends concurrently with that of the incumbent mayor. This is the first reading. If adopted, ordinance 2022 will require an assembly member to resign their assembly seat before filing declaration of candidacy for the office of mayor. And just so the public knows, in the assembly, it's not on the agenda, but I asked for this revision. So I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by member Lynn, seconded by member Tremblay. Discussion. Excuse me, member Kensinger?
Yes, what would happen? Let's say if we had 3 assembly members that wanted to run for mayor. would that mean then that we would, all three of them would have to resign?
If they had
That's
time left
correct.
on their term, can that
Right.
happen? It's only 2 assembly members a year that,
Yes, that may
Could be
not happen
twice.
because it's 2 assembly members and the mayor would be the 3, and then other years it's just 2.
Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I had more process questions. So this is for Clerk Thompson. So we know when the mayor resigns, the vice mayor takes over. And so in a scenario where an assembly member resigns, normally there's a petition, so there's open seat and there's a call for people to put their names in. So in this scenario, during the filing period, an assembly member would resign, creating an open seat. And so would people filing for office for that election be told that there would be a concurrent opening at the same time for them to then file that letter of intent at the same time?
It would certainly depend upon when the assembly member decided they were going to run for mayor and resign their seat. So a vacancy doesn't occur until the resignation is accepted by the assembly. So that would have to be at a meeting. But yes, if it were just before declaration of candidacy, begins, that'd be perfect. Then I would throw it right on there and say, hey, we're gonna have an assembly member seat on the ballot as well. But they could also wait until a week before, the deadline to file, and there may not be time for that resignation to be accepted, yet they'd be able to file for candidacy regardless. So anyway, it depends.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, follow-up question, just another process-oriented one. So in this scenario, it's an assembly member whose seat is not up. So that means 2 assembly members would be, assuming they're running for reelection, 2 current sitting members would be on the ballot, as well as the mayor. And then in that scenario where there was a 4th person appointed for the seat until the concurrent election, that would mean 4 people of the current assembly would be on the ballot at the same time?
It would mean there would be at least 3, depending upon the timing.
So you have the mayor would be up for election, 2 standard assembly seats, the 2
Right.
not in contention.
Correct.
And then if the 4th person was somebody who had filed a letter
Steps
of
down.
intent,
Yes, there may
or
be.
not even had stepped down, a potential candidate, somebody who just filed a citizen who is not a current member of the assembly, who also had filed a letter of intent to fill the temporary seat and then was appointed by the assembly. So they were filling on a temporary basis as an assembly member.
Okay,
So those 4 seats would all be
that's
current.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. However, there would still be a quorum because of that one appointed person still. We're assuming no one stepped down. So I could see a situation, however, where if someone did step down to run for mayor and the mayor was up and 2 other assembly members, we may not have a quorum of the assembly for a while, but yeah, it could get messy. But hopefully people will have their mind made up of what they're gonna do and do it properly so that we can properly fill the seat.
Member Stanton Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a procedural question first, and then kind of depending on how that sounds, I'll have a follow-up. So as is customary, the member of the assembly who puts an action item on the agenda leads out oftentimes to give their reasoning. So really, since it was your agenda item, I just wanted to hear from you. And after that, I may have a statement or I might just pass the floor. So I'd just like to give it to you since it was your action item and see what you were thinking.
Well, I was considering bringing this ordinance change forward before the last election. And I was thinking, well, that probably wouldn't be good since, I was running for mayor. It might look like, I didn't want competition from any assembly members. That wasn't the case. I talked to Beth Welton, the mayor of Juneau. They use this process and it works quite well for them. And so anyway, the second whereas kind of explains it. In the case of the Borough Assembly, a seated assembly member could file a declaration of candidacy for the seat of mayor without resigning the assembly member's seat. And if the assembly member were to be elected to the position of mayor, a vacancy of the assembly seat would occur. The newly elected mayor would then be one of the 6 assembly members who will appoint a replacement for the vacant assembly member seat until the next municipal election. The next whereas, the above scenario could cause a stacking, not a particular word I, would have put in there, but could cause a stacking of aligned political opinion members on the assembly. That is my concern. And I did go over this with the clerk and she ran it by the attorney, so I did say, that was okay with the language, Jim. But that, Member Stanton Gregor, that is, my rationale.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate you fleshing that out for me, and that clarifies for me. Thank you. Then I'll segue into my follow-up and cede the floor. Myself, I have a term that expires the same as yours, so I have no skin in this game either way. If I wanted to run against her, I just could. Or run for my seat. It's, so I'm not a part of, it doesn't apply to me. And I thank you for explaining your rationale, and I hear it. And the hang up I have, and I think I have to vote no, is I look at national politics and talk, the highest office that happens to be mayor in a community or president in the US. An example that comes out to me, and there's tons, so I'll just grab onto one easy one, is Senator John McCain chose to run as a senator for president in 2008 against Barack Obama. We all know that, not trying to give a history lesson. And he lost, that's the way elections go. But the citizens of Arizona, and I would argue the country, would have been at a great loss if he would have had to give up his seat to do that. He was duly elected by the citizens of Arizona. That's, by kicking him out of that seat, it would have been, in my opinion, disrespecting the electorate of that state. And granted, it's not apples to apples, but I think it's close. It keeps, if he chose to seek higher office and fail, he shouldn't be kicked out of the game. And again, it's just one example out of many. You grab John Kerry, you pick up your history book, and hundreds of examples of people who sought higher office, but still got to represent their community and their state. And on a small level, I personally think it's better for democracy to let it be a free for all if it wants to be. Like if one of the members on there who does not have a seat now that expires when yours does wants to go for it, like have at it. The more candidates we have and the more robust our democratic process is, I think it's better. So I don't think I can vote yes for this, but thank you for explanation, Mr. Mayor. I cede.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I probably won't be supporting this as well. Several years ago, we had a vacancy at the mayor's level and we had the vice mayor take over. And we filled the seat for the assembly seat. It wasn't by a dictate by the new mayor, it was by a consensus of the assembly, and that system seems to work. We all might have different opinions of things, but number one, we're all looking out for the best interest of the community of Petersburg, and I think the system works as it is right now. If we can't agree on a candidate to fill an office, that we just take our time and until we can come up with 4 votes or 3 votes to an affirmative to seat somebody up here for a year until the vacancy is filled. So I think the system works now. Like somebody mentioned earlier today, this is a solution looking for a problem, and yeah, I'm satisfied with the way it's working now. So thank you.
Member Lynn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I went back, since I was on the Charter Commission that helped create the charter. I went back and looked at it, and my recollection is that we pulled the language from the old city charter directly into this. And I asked the clerk if what the code said, and the code that we currently have is the same code that was in the old city code. So nothing's changed for the last, 20 years? So I don't know if there's been a problem during that period that I can see or that I remember, that why we would need it. That's kind of my thinking right now, my hang up here. I don't see a problem here, but maybe I'm missing something.
Member Tremblay, did you have a follow-up?
I did. Just kind of a final statement. I think I'll be voting no. I do respect the concern about worrying about ideological positioning on the assembly. I think that's what's beautiful about local government is we're all just here to do our jobs. But in a scenario where there would be an open seat after an election, you helpfully have these newly approved final numbers of how the community would feel about potential candidates for the assembly seat. And so I would hope that that assembly in that scenario would say, look at who would receive the most votes. 2 people got elected, but now there's a 3rd open seat, and possibly look at that list and see who got number 3. And, you know, that makes for a natural way to consider possible candidates. So considering the scenarios that I kind of threw at Clerk Thompson about what could happen in the sake of pre-election scrambling, I don't really see how it's a logical process change that would really benefit the community. So I'll be voting no.
Any other input? Member Feinwald?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I frankly was having a hard time following some of the questions Assemblymember Tremblay was fielding to the clerk, which makes me think that this change to the ordinance might create some confusion. That's usually not a good sign when something leads to a lot of questions and what ifs. It's nice when it's really clear on its face. And as other people have said before me, it seems like the current system is working okay. And while there is, you know, the potential for stacking, as you point out, it would be temporary until someone else was voted to replace them. So I don't think I'll be voting for this as it's currently drafted here. Thank you.
Other input? Member Kinsinger?
I checked, and I believe Juneau is the only community that has an ordinance like this in Southeast Alaska. And my observation is that Juneau's got over 30,000 people in it. And it's been my observation of watching the assembly operate for many decades that we seem to have more of a problem, maybe not the last couple of years, but in years past, of getting enough people to even want to run so we can have a decent election. That hasn't been the case the last 2 elections, and I think that's good. But I can also foresee in the future where we have a hard time just getting enough people who want to do this job. So I don't, personally, that's my big hang up with this. I don't want to have somebody get off the assembly just because they lose a race for mayor. So I can't support it because I don't think we have enough people in town.
Any other input? Obviously, I'll be voting for this. I don't, there would be some confusion a little bit, but I would like to hear from the public in a public hearing on this ordinance. They're the ones that vote for us to sit here and represent them. I would like to see them have a chance. There's 3 readings. And so take it to the 2nd reading, have a public hearing, and then vote it down then or vote it down now. That's, my opinion. I would like to give the citizens of the community that elect us the consideration to voice their opinion in a public hearing. So with that being said, and if there's no other input, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
David,
No.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
No.
Jeff,
No.
Jay,
Nope.
Thomas,
No.
Chelsea,
No.
Okay, ordinance 2022-02 passes in its first reading, 6-1 with the mayor in favor. That brings us to ordinance 2022-03. This is an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, chapter 14.20, entitled Municipal Harbors to increase harbor fees.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. As just a brief point of order, if I may, sir.
Yes.
Just that it was reported inaccurately. The ordinance failed on a 1-6, not passed in its first reading. Sorry to
Okay, well,
interrupt. Just as a procedural thing. Just wanted to make sure it was clear.
The vote doesn't count for 6?
Sorry, sir, it does not.
Okay, I didn't think so. I knew that all along. Okay, back to where we were. Next item on new business, ordinance 2022-03, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, chapter 14.2, entitled Municipal Harbors to increase harbor fees. Adoption of this ordinance will increase harbor moorage and user fees effective May 1st, 2022. Entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by member Kinsinger, or was it member Mucci? Member Mucci and seconded by member Lem. Discussion. And if there are any questions of the harbor master, Glow is zooming in this evening. There's in this, on the packet, it gives a rundown of the harbor increases. It's through the whole gamut. So Any discussion? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like the ordinance says, the last increase was 2018. And it was part of the recommendation of the waterfront master plan. I think the rate increase is 5%. Like Gloria Ann said at the Harbor Advisory Board meeting, she didn't want to be the highest harbor rates in Southeast, but she's comfortable being second highest. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this. And I was just curious if the harbor master had anything to add to the discussion, or it's pretty lined out in the changes to the ordinance. So
I
thank you.
would prefer if she was asked questions than just to have her part of the debate, actually. Member Lynn?
Yes, for Glo, a question for you. How did you arrive at the 5%?
I did an informal kind of review of other communities in our region, as well as our budget. So we just kind of used those numbers to formulate. We did a kind of across the board 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And of course, you don't want to blow it out of the water. But we need to up our income a little bit to support some ongoing fees and things that the harbor has as its annual budget.
Any other questions? Member Lynn, you have another question?
If I have a follow-up question to it, that have you done any projections? I know you have a lot of projects coming up on, on the docket here that we really do need to do. Where does this put you in relation to those projects now to push those forward? Can you give a kind of a summary of it?
Yeah, a lot of these things are going to go through a honeymoon phase. A lot of the big projects, because they're brand new, they're not upgrades to what we already have. So it would be more the fact of it has to do with the ongoing budget when it comes to employees and those kind of things that go into having a full-time 24-hour staff. So no, we didn't project, if we put in a huge facility out at Scow Bay, what that's going to mean, because it could be a decade away. And I'm not sure that the maintenance issues or the operations would change that much for us, in the next decade. If it's a new facility, you usually don't have a lot of maintenance issues. So that's primarily our budget is staffing and O&M.
Thank you.
You're done, Member Lynn? Member Kinzinger?
Yes, Glo, what was the opinion of the Harbor Board of this rate increase?
They were supportive of it. They voted, they didn't vote on it, but they were supportive of it. And I think they communicated to the liaison that they gave the thumbs up for you to move forward with it.
Thank you.
Mayor Jensen? I'm sorry, Mayor Jensen. Having heard you read what I wrote in this agenda, I made an error, and I was supposed to change the effective date from May 1 to April 1 on this ordinance. So I just want to say out loud for the second reading, when it comes in the next packet, the effective date will be April 1 rather than May 1. That was my error, and I apologize.
Bump it up a month. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Now we know. Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting for this tonight in the first reading. The Harbor Master and the Harbor Board have vetted this. No one likes rate increases, but the cost of business keeps going up. I look forward to hearing from the public, and it makes sense to move forward to the second reading. Thanks.
Any other input? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll on ordinance 2022-03.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Chelsea? Thomas?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, at the next meeting, we'll have a second reading on this harbor rate ordinance as well as a public hearing. And that brings us to the fiscal year 2023 priority Petersburg Borough Federal Projects list. And what's listed here is, had the wrong day on it. It was for yesterday's meeting, so the manager, that's why we have another copy of it on our dais tonight. It's just changes it for today's date, 2/22/22. So anyway, I'd entertain a motion to approve this federal projects list.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Tremblay. Discussion. Member Lynn.
Yes, if I may, to the manager. First of all, I really appreciate Carl putting on a couple of those projects, because if we could pick out some money for those outside of having to bond for them or do something, I'm in hog heaven with that one. But the second part is back to Scal Bay. I'm in support of the project, but one of the things out there in the future that we're going to have to deal with is we have a building there that houses fire equipment and so forth. And I've talked a number of times with Sandy and with other folks, and obviously some of that's there because that helps the insurance rates out the road. But it isn't going to take very long if we get other types of things out there that's going to be an absolute conflict. And that space can be used, for boats or for repairs, what have you. So someplace along the line here, I really think we need to begin to look at moving that facility and making sure that we can maintain the insurance rates and do other things. Whether that's a separate project or whether including this, and I'm not arguing one way or another, but I can see the problem coming up real quick if this goes through.
Okay.
Thank you.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, agreeing with Member Lynn, and maybe a question to the city manager, has there been any discussion about this? I know we've talked about it, we've skirted the issue a couple of times, but has there been any formal thought process about what we're gonna do with that fire hall that out there at Scal Bay as this process moves forward, or is this something that the assembly needs to direct the city manager to look into?
Well, I don't know if the manager has a question about that, but, or an answer to that question, but, I understand your guys' concern about that, but that isn't really, if I looking at this priority list, right, it's not on what we're voting for. So, but I know it's an issue, and if we do expand Scal Bay, and if that fire hall or, garage for the fire truck or two that are in it and the fire tower have to be moved, it's going to be a discussion. But yeah, I agree. Maybe it is something that we have to put on a future agenda, but maybe not until we get money to do it. Remember,
If I could, through the mayor. Between Glow and Liz, you have two very, very effective ladies. And their plans that involve the Scal Bay Boatyard have always allowed that fire station to stay exactly where it is. But they have also what it could be if that could move. So because funding has been very hard to get for this project, we've all kind of decided not to complicate things, in a sense, is that if we ever get the funding for this, we know we've got a project that could go forward, and then it would give the borough time to figure out, okay, what do we do now with the fire, potential relocation down the road. So again, they made plans to include the boatyard with the fire station still being there purposely. They would love to do it without it there, but they're ready to accept it staying there, which would give the borough time to relocate it at some point. That's where we stand at the moment. If the assembly wants to approach that differently, you just have to tell us.
the discussion has been had. Member Kinsker?
Yes, I think it's a little premature on the fire hall. I think one thing you really have to look at there is if you do put in another harbor basin out there, you're going to have a tremendous amount of fill material that's going to go up on the uplands, and it's going to add quite a bit of acreage to that land out there. There's also, if you look at the site map, there's also quite a bit of other land out there that's also available that the borough currently owns. One of those chunk of land that's on the other side of the DOT facility there. And then DOT has been ambivalent about about what their intentions are there. And actually, a lot of the DOT lot is actually on borough property there. So there is quite a bit of land out at Scow Bay. So I don't think it's as important of an issue that we get into that right now, because as Lois said, this is like a 10-year project. It's nothing, well, hopefully we'll see it in our lifetimes, Bob, but I'm feeling pretty good tonight, but it's going to be down the road a ways.
Member Tremblay, and then.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it back to the list at hand and thank the manager and Carl and everyone else who put it together. I see a lot of very good long-term infrastructure investment in the community, and I can't think of anything I would add that would somehow surpass any of these. There's moving forward with the discussion of the community hospital. There's marine transportation projects, ADA ramps for South Harbor, discussion of the airport bypass road developing and surfacing. There's Scow Bay, as we talked about, water treatment plant, clear well replacement. There's Sandy Beach Road water main replacement and pump station for force main replacement. So the details are in the packet if any members of the public want to see them. But yeah, I'm just ready to go forward on the list unless anyone else has more to.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Number 4, development of hard surface paving for the airport bypass road. Is there any other, is this just the verbiage that we have, or is there other, are we any farther along on the process, or just our wish list?
No, wait, there's, through the mayor. No, Carl put this together for me a couple of years ago as far as some estimates that we could have as a placeholder. I mean, it's never really moved very far, but this list is put together with the help of our federal lobbyists based on the kind of things that the infrastructure bill has money for. So we tried to be very picky and choosy about what went into this list. They had to be important to us. At the same time, there had to be potential money available. So that's why they're here.
Okay, any other questions? Member Stanton Gregor.
Yeah, not a question, just to let the public know, I'll be voting for this. It's a loose list. Like the manager said, it's things that we could use for our community, and I'll be voting for it as is. And thank you to Member Tremblay for kind of lining up the details, because these projects check all the boxes. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other input on this federal priority list, have the clerk call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. So we have a official federal priority list. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, and that is wastewater discharge permit letter to Governor Dunleavy. Some of the language that it might change after the recent discussion in Juneau, but I'd entertain a motion to approve sending this letter.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know who can answer this, Steve or whoever, but the question is if we were to have to put in these changes to our treatment plants here, how much would, just a rough number on how much would it cost the borough?
Carl, can you answer that?
We don't know exactly how much this project would be. I've kind of used a placeholder of $2 million, just kind of a very rough estimate of what it would take in feasibility studies, engineering and design and permitting and construction. It's very loose.
Mucci.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. So for the folks at home, what are they asking us to do additionally? Just so people understand at home. That's
Carl can probably answer it better, but the first phase, the lower cost phase, would be a disinfection system, and then use chlorine, I believe, right?
That's yeah, through the mayor. That is one option. There are different ways to disinfect a wastewater effluent, and chlorination is one, but we can't discharge a fully chlorinated wastewater, so we have to dechlorinate after we do that. So that adds the cost of both for the project and for operations after the fact.
What the state was kind of insinuating at the DEC with Randy Bates, the meeting, they were saying DEC would like to see secondary treatment for all these plants, then the price tag goes way up, so.
Project like that would go up by a factor of 10 likely.
Member Lynn?
A follow-up to Member Mucci's question. Uh, if we had to put that in, and while we're putting it in, we still would have to operate the existing system. So we're going to have, that would add some additional costs and problems, I assume, to the whole design and construction of it, would it not?
Through the mayor, yes, definitely. It's a tricky topic to build an improvement to a wastewater treatment plant because you can't turn it off. You know, it needs to operate all the time. And, you know, there are probably ways to build additional treatment trains and, you know, with pipes and valving to turn on and off, but it will add costs to a project to retrofit a plant with disinfection.
Thank you.
Okay, any other input? Member, yeah, lost your name. Kinsinger.
Yeah, I forgot too. Carl, if we had to do tertiary or secondary treatment, I mean, I know you probably don't have a clue, but, or maybe you do. How much is that going to cost us in operation costs per year?
Well, it depends on what type of treatment train is developed. There are different ways to achieve that level of treatment. But it will definitely be more than we pay now, and it may extend to staffing. There's a lot of secondary treatment plants who use a biological system to provide that level of treatment. And that biological system needs to be monitored constantly. And so a lot of secondary plants have 24-hour coverage. And right now we don't. We have 7-day coverage, but only 8 hours a day. So it could, depending on the complexity of the plant, it could push us to much bigger staff.
Dan Gregor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, at face value, the idea of upgrading our water treatment plant looks wonderful from, you know, we live off the sea here. That said, I'm definitely going to be supporting this letter because it strikes me as another unfunded mandate from the state that I cannot abide. If the state wants us to do this, I would expect not assurances, but guarantees of financial support. So this is a great letter, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay, any other input? Yeah, I think it's a worthy letter to send, and hopefully we got some attention at the meeting on Friday. So if there's no other input, will the clerk call a roll?
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda, action item, childcare work session. Assembly Member Mucci wishes to schedule a work session possibly on Wednesday, March 23rd to discuss childcare issues and consider implementation of helpful suggestions. And there's some listed, but I'll entertain a motion first and then a second.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. And I guess the first thing we need to do is pick a date. March 23rd has been proposed. Thumbs up? Yes, no? All those in favor of March 23rd, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We don't have a time. Probably should pick a time too, but we could work on that. So, unless we want to pick a time now, evening would be better so people can participate that, work in the childcare industry and et cetera. Member Mucci, you have an idea for that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't have an idea for a time. You know, the childcare industry, they're working hard all day. I don't know if 6 would be a good time, you know, give them a chance to go home and check in with their family. I'm just throwing 6 o'clock out there. I'm not stuck on that time, but just for discussion.
6 PM in the evening, work for March 23rd. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? A lot of us are up in limbo. I will probably be in Craig. So, okay, And I guess the agenda will change, so I don't know if we need to go over these potential discussion items unless Member Mucci wants to read them.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't need to read them. They're in the packet and they're on the website. These are just some of the things that popped up during the Share Coalition meeting and the work session that we had. I can't remember, 3 weeks ago. But it's, some of the last work sessions that we've had, members were interested in what was going to be on the agenda. And these are just some of the things that were on my list. And I'm sure there's more things that we need to be talking about or just thinking about. I know the Share Coalition met last Thursday and they're actively involved in this. I told somebody today that the childcare issue in town, it's really hard for me to get a hold of. It's very fluid and there's a lot of parties in town that, a lot of organizations in town that treat it a little differently. The nonprofits and the for-profits, we've heard that it should be all treated as one, and I get that. But I just didn't want to lose the momentum on talking about childcare in Petersburg, because I've said it before and you're probably tired of hearing me say it, but childcare in Petersburg is the cornerstone to the economic development in town. But without dependable childcare in Petersburg, we can't get back to normal. I think we've seen some positive changes up. We see new ownership in one of the childcare facilities in town. They're excited about it. There's other people who are excited about childcare in town. And I think the conversation is very healthy and it's positive, and I didn't want the assembly to let this, fall by the wayside. And so I keep pushing it.
Excuse me, Member
Yes.
Mucci, it doesn't look like we've scheduled a meeting, so maybe there'll be
Yeah,
more discussion and a report from that.
absolutely.
Work session.
Yep.
Any other input on this? So I guess we're gonna have a meeting of Member Tremblay.
Yeah, just some quick clarifications. So typically in a work session, you need to be, am I correct in this, invited by the assembly to come join us? So we'll be inviting nonprofit and for-profit childcare providers to join us for this conversation.
I would think anybody would be able to come to a public work session. Member Mucci.
Just in response to Member Tremblay, yeah, if, sometimes we've had work sessions where it was just the assembly chatting about it, and that works as well. But I think it's important to have a wide-ranging conversation about, because for me, it's important to hear what the professionals are discussing, and then giving us some perspective on what we want to get behind and move forward with. I mean, I think that some of the issues that I've had listed on here are things that interest me, but that's just easy stuff to look at. But I think there's more dynamic things and more complicated things that we need to dig into as well.
Other assembly members? Clerk Thompson.
So Member Tremblay is correct that a work session usually is not where public can come and give their input. That would be a town hall meeting or a public meeting. A work session is usually where the minds get together and talk about things. And so usually it is people that are invited to come and speak at that work session along with the assembly. So we're going to have to work on that about what your thoughts are. If you're actually wanting people from the public to be able to come and speak, we'll have to figure out how to make that happen.
Sorry for the confusion there. I would think just a work session with people invited would be appropriate, would be the best way, since that's where we do it. And then from that, if the assembly is going to move forward with any direction, then the public would have all the time they need to come and comment on our thoughts.
I would agree.
Member Tremblay?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify it so folks know what to expect from this. So that sounds great. I would love that kind of facilitated conversation because, none of us are necessarily the experts on this topic. So getting as many of them in conversation with us would be great. And then it looks like we will have an assembly meeting. There's the 7th as well as the 21st. And so at one of those, we would formalize the agenda because anything we would want to talk about policy-wise would need to be explicitly on the work session agenda, correct? Or can we get, free form with it?
Yes, you certainly can. We can go either way. It depends on what you want. If you want a formalized agenda and you want the assembly to approve it before we have the work session, we can do that. Otherwise, a work session sometimes don't even have an agenda. I would think this one you want an agenda.
Glenn?
I think we need to go back to basics and forget some of this stuff. The reason I say that is because it's under state social services and what provides funding for the daycare centers throughout Alaska. They have a set of rules. The set of rules involve both, providing funding for families, but it's different based on different criteria. And I know just about enough about parts of it to make me dangerous. The next part has to do with funding of the daycare centers themselves and the qualifications for daycare workers and for setting standards and a few other things. I think one of the things that you need to, if you're going to do this, you need to think about is backing this up in the day and getting a couple people from the state to explain what the rules are. Because I think the rules, from everything I'm hearing, are outdated. And I think a very good thing, a very good approach would be is to take a position that we either through a resolution or some kind of a letter back to state saying we would support doing this, or we think these things need to be looked at. But I just know enough about parts of those to make me totally dangerous. And I really think we need a much better, all 7 of us need a much better explanation of the basics to help the child care centers here. And I know they don't have time to do all the digging on some of this.
Yeah, so member Mucci, and then this discussion is basically just setting a date, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, Member Lynn. I really think we should have that. At the last one that we had Nils Andresen give us a little update about ARPA funds, and perhaps we could find somebody from the state to kind of give us a 5 or 10 minute scenario about what's required of folks and answer some of the questions as we get started. The last work session we had regarding the ARPA funding, it was just an hour. We burned through an hour very quickly. So it should be, I imagine it'll be pretty structured, give people a chance to line us out on what some of the thoughts they have. And yeah, I think we can come up with a list of folks to invite as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I guess we've already scheduled the work session, March 23rd at 6 p.m. So I think we move on to the next item on the agenda, communications. Communications are listed, and the communications listed are since February 3rd. They're on the website. You can go there to see communications that have been sent to the assembly. Next item 17, assembly discussion items. Borough employees as elected board members. Assembly member Mucci requested discussion regarding what would need to change to allow borough employees to serve on elected borough boards. Member Mucci, since you asked for this to be on the agenda.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was traveling last week and Clerk Thompson and I were playing email tag, and I didn't understand the whole process of it. Last fall, I was asked about what would have to happen for school board members or hospital board members to work for the borough if there was a job that came up and stuff. And since talking to Clerk Thompson about this, it would have to be a charter change, which would go before a vote of the public. And I'm not willing to move that thing forward anymore, so I don't need to waste a lot of time with the conversation. So thank you.
Anybody else have any input on this since it's on the agenda? Okay, moving on. Community Cleanup Week, Baylor Voucher System. Assemblymember Mucci requested discussion regarding a possible Community Cleanup Week in the current Baylor Voucher System. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Assemblymember Tremblay talked about this at the last meeting, and I was just looking for a little bit more specifics about having a free cleanup week the week before Little Norway. I think it's May 7th. And I was just trying to sort out what that would cost the borough to make that happen, so that we can decide if we want to do that or not. I think I've heard figures in the past, but before we say, yeah, let's do a free dump week, let's figure out how much it's going to cost Public Works. And I think we need to have a cleanup week. We've had, I'm sure Member Tremblay has heard from the same person I have about this, and I think it's a great idea. I want to thank Roxy for reaching out, but I think that's we need to do it, and I just want to know how much it costs. So I'm just curious.
Maybe Chris Cotter would be able to answer some questions.
If I could jump in
Yeah,
first,
sure,
Mr. Mayor,
Manager,
through the mayor. Chris and Carl we haven't done this in a long time, so both of them will probably have comments about it. I guess the biggest issue is trying to come up with a cost, and they'll speak to that. Because it just hasn't been done, it's really difficult to come up with any kind of reasonable cost. I do want to caution the assembly. None of that is included in the current sanitation rate study. So we changed this, which adds cost, which means we have to pay to get rid of it. Now we are kind of out of pocket on the rate study piece of it. Anyway, I just wanted that to be said. So
Carl
Chris
or
and Carl
Chris?
could probably speak to it better than I can.
He probably has more history on it, but if it's up to Mr. Cotta, he's passing the buck. Mr. Cotta.
Let Chris start. No, no, any- So I did talk to Carl a little bit about this. And I guess I had a couple questions, you know, through the mayor, if I could. One would be, you know, what the scope of this would be, as, like, would it apply to everybody in the borough? Are we just talking about certain classes of, you know, would it be residential or residential and commercial? Would it just be borough account holders, or would it be everybody and anybody that comes up to the scale? You know, I wasn't quite sure what the intent would be there.
Member Tremblay.
I'm just going to make some inferences based on what is not being said, that this might be cost prohibitive to the point that a town-wide week of free dump day may not be the best solution. So I'm going to skip ahead to the other half of this conversation of the Baylor voucher system. And if we could explain that for the public. And then I'm also, because I think some of what came up in conversation with Roxy about this was not everybody has access to getting stuff to the dump. And so we were just talking about how to open up access for folks. And so talking about like a voucher system, if we could get, if we had volunteers with trucks who were interested in bringing stuff for people that may not be able to make deliveries, either because they're physically unable to, you know, load up hundreds of pounds of stuff and dump it all themselves, or if they don't have the vehicle for that, you know, so that's kind of some of my thinking behind a little bit of this process. So if we could explain the voucher system, and then would there be a way, this wouldn't even have to be borough organized at this point, this is community organized, like how could groups of people help clean up from, you know, winter and just time of stuff around town in time for spring?
So the voucher system kind of grew out of the free dump week tradition, if you will. The cost of free dump week went up a lot once borough started shipping waste out. Whereas prior to that, you know, we had our own landfill. So there was always a cost to that, even using our landfill, but there's a definite defined, you know, per ton cost to shipping stuff off island that keeps going up. The way I understand it from Carl is, you know, an attempt to contain that cost, we decided to go to a voucher program, which is essentially a discount program. You pay $45 is the current cost of voucher, and you get basically a certain amount of various commodities, 400 pounds of baler, I believe 1,500 pounds of landfill, half off car disposal, and 4 tires included in that cost. If you add up everything that's included in the voucher, it's, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of $220 worth of credits that you get for that $45 fee. That fee allows us to recover some of the costs of running the program and disposing of the waste received as part of that program. Carl and I have been hampered a little bit by our inability to get into our network files lately. So when we're talking about this, Carl's going by memory and I'm having to go by memory on some of this stuff. But Carl's recollection was that the last event resulted in about $22,000 worth of lost revenue for the department. And I just sort of assigned a guesstimate to the year that took place. I'm going to say 2005. I don't know. I know they were still doing that when I got to town in 2002, but I don't know when it stopped. So if you just kind of assign that cost to, let's say, 2005, and then I used like a 3% per year inflation rate. You know, the cost of that now would be something like $36,000 in lost revenue. So it'd be a substantial amount. As was mentioned, we didn't build that cost into our rate study. We did plan on continuing the voucher program, which is, you know, that encourages residential customers to, you know, clean up their sites. It gives them a really nice discount for disposing of things that, like junk cars, that are typically things that we don't want, you know, sitting around town. Another nice thing about the voucher program is that it's all year. So when you pay for that voucher, you don't have to worry about trying to take everything to the dump that particular week. If you're on vacation that week or you can't get to the landfill that week, doesn't matter. You got all year to use that credit. So that's a really nice feature of the program. But yeah, that's a little bit of the history there, and I guess the intent of the program. Do you have anything to add to that, Carl? No? Yeah. Okay.
Clerk Tremblay.
Thank you. I just want to play through scenarios where this could be a private-public partnership. Say private, either individuals or companies were to take on the cost of the dump runs, you know, like put it on basically their account, but pick up garbage for other people and then deliver it to the dump. Is that a scenario that could happen in town? Like that you just come up and, you know, they don't know where the garbage is from, right? So you're just giving your name or your company's name or something. And it could-
I'm not sure I follow there. Are you saying a voucher program?
Not
based on
necessarily
our-
voucher, just like if there were to be townwide cleanup day sponsored by X, Y, and Z. And so those would be companies taking on the cost of bringing stuff up to the dump
I see.
for community members. So say like, you know, I'm on Wrangell Avenue, so householders of Wrangell Avenue we could pool together and say, hey neighbors, bring garbage here and we're gonna take it up for you. We'll take on the cost. It would be just on those individual people to do it and bring it up
So-
together. So it'd be like that individual person bringing up the garbage or that company taking on the, I'm putting on my organizing brain, thinking of how I just want to get town cleaned up. So I'm trying to think through scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like something that could be accomplished with a little bit of coordination between the department and whoever wanted to kept the right records and assess the cost, but I think that could be done without too much hassle.
Giving you guys a heads up so we don't inundate you on a day that you're not expecting it. Okay, thank you.
Kinsinger? What's the price of steel now? Are we making money on junk cars or is it costing us money to get rid of them?
You know, and it's been a little while now, the last time we sent metal out, I believe was 2018, and that was a cost neutral proposition. Wrangell just had a bunch of metal taken out recently. I think that was also, it didn't cost them anything, but they didn't get anything from it either. So,
So it'd be possible to have a junk car clean up and be somewhat revenue neutral?
You know, I guess as far as the disposal, probably, we have some effort, you know, in-house to smash the cars, stack the cars. The biggest problem with junk cars is the transportation of them to the landfill. That's where most people, I think, get hung up. There is a cost for disposing of a car. But it seems to me, just in my conversations with customers and so forth, that the biggest obstacle is getting them up there, you know, the cost of towing And then sometimes just finding someone to take it up there for you, is an issue. So, but yeah, that would be less of an impact than say taking garbage, over the scale for free, because that's something that costs us $135 a ton to send out. Metal definitely is a lesser cost impact.
Their input on this discussion about the cleanup week Baylor voucher system? Dan Gregor?
No, I'd pass. I thought about it and I'll sit on it till next time. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, item C, discussion item, Police Department Retention Report. Assembly member Mucci requested discussion regarding the status and content of the Police Department Retention Report being researched and drafted by Manager Giesbrecht. And we kind of touched on this in the manager's report, so maybe member Mucci feels we've addressed all the
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I do.
discussion.
I do.
So any other input? Okay, moves us to item D, Assembly member comments. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. We heard earlier about a piece of property out in Sandy Beach that folks were concerned about. If that goes through and it is a sale, is that a sealed competitive bid process?
Thompson or?
That will be
Manager Gies-
determined by the assembly.
Okay, but in the past, we have done a sealed bid process.
There's been live auctions.
We have
Yeah,
done
okay.
both.
Okay.
Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am really looking forward to the retention report. I've said before, we are in a crisis situation at the police department with the dispatchers. Until we get the dispatchers taken care of, the police department will not be able to function properly because eventually we're gonna have police officers answering the phone when you call for the 911 or because if one dispatcher was call in sick or go on vacation or something, we'd be down to 2 and we need 5.5. And I'm hoping that there's some solid recommendations in this retention report because we need to do something sooner than later with our dispatch staff. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have comments? Member Stanton Gregor or anybody at the dais? Seeing none. Any recognitions? Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank Public Health. I picked up my box of 10 KN95s today. So if anybody is out there and they're having to deal with the public and they're immunocompromised, or if they're just not wanting to mess with COVID because they have a big vacation or surgery or just work that they can't foresee being out for 2 weeks, given the fact that we've had community spread in town basically since September, I know I feel a lot better having one, and they are free. They're come in boxes of 10 and they're super comfortable. So I just, the hours, I think they're something like 8 to 5 with the midday lunch break. KFSK is running great PSAs and I'm sure they're in the paper as well. So I just wanted to let folks know that they're there and they're free and they're more than happy to give them out to any member of the community that wants one. So just wanted to put that out there.
Any other recognitions by staff or assembly members this evening? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None. It's unanimous. We adjourn
We
at
agreed on something.
7:55.